callous judge scorns a homeless 78-year-old decorated veteran in his court. Little does he know, a powerful CEO, whose own father the old soldier heroically saved in a forgotten war, is about to walk through those doors and unleash justice. The imposing Oakmont City Courthouse, Courtroom 3, was a monument to impersonal justice, its polished mahogany and stern flags doing little to warm the chill that settled deep in Thomas Ashton's old bones. At 78, Sergeant Ashton, retired, cut a figure both poignant and resilient. His back, once ramrod straight from decades of military discipline, was now bowed, not just by age, but by the relentless hardships of the streets. He wore a faded, olive-green M65 field jacket, a relic from his service in Vietnam, meticulously clean despite its phrase, a single, tarnished purple heart pinned above the U.S. Army tape on his chest. It was his last bastion of dignity. He stood before Judge Marcus Thorne, accused of unlawful vagrancy, a euphemism for being found asleep on a park bench near the city's war memorial by an overzealous rookie cop. For Ashton, the memorial, with its cold stone listing names of fallen comrades, had become a place of solace, a silent communion with a past that felt more real than his present. Judge Thorne, a man in his 50s whose tailored suit and impatient demeanor screamed self-importance, glanced at the charge sheet, then at Ashton, his lip curling almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Thomas Ashton," he began, his voice devoid of warmth, "you're charged with unlawful vagrancy. Another one clogging up the docket. How do you plead?" Ashton cleared his throat, his voice raspy from disuse and cold nights. "Your Honor, I wasn't causing any harm. It was cold, and the shelters were full. I served this country for 20 years, he gestured vaguely to his purple heart. Judge Thorne cut him off with a dismissive wave of his hand, a small, cruel chuckle escaping his lips. "Oh, here we go, the veteran card. Mr. Ashton, this court has heard countless sob stories. Your past service, commendable as it may or may not have been, doesn't give you a free pass to flout city ordinances. If your life choices have led you to this unfortunate state, that's a matter for you, not this court. Frankly, if those medals were worth anything, you wouldn't be standing here, would you?" The judge's words, sharp and public, landed like blows. A murmur of discomfort rippled through the few spectators, a weary public defender waiting for another case, a couple of bored law students. Ashton flinched as if struck, his weathered face, usually etched with a quiet kindness, now flushed with a deep, humiliated red. He clutched the worn strap of his old army rucksack, his only worldly possession, tighter. He'd faced enemy fire with less trepidation than he felt under the judge's scornful gaze. He tried to speak, to explain about his wife's medical bills that had wiped out his meager pension, the PTSD nightmares that made holding down a steady job impossible in his later years, the bureaucratic maze of VA support that had yielded nothing but frustration. But the judge simply wasn't listening, already shuffling papers, eager to move on to the next nuisance. Judge Thorne, clearly relishing his own perceived wit and authority, leaned forward. "So, Mr. Ashton, since your illustrious military career hasn't equipped you to find a roof over your head, perhaps a few nights in county lockup will provide the, shall we say, structured environment you seem to require? Or perhaps a hefty fine you undoubtedly cannot pay." He smirked, looking around as if expecting applause for his stern handling of the matter. Before Ashton could summon a response, his throat tight with unshed tears of rage and shame, the heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a decisive, almost percussive sound that cut through the judge's sneering words. All heads, including Judge Thorne's, snapped towards the entrance. Framed in the doorway stood a woman who radiated an almost palpable aura of command and quiet power. Olivia Sterling, in her early 40s, was impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray bespoke suit that whispered, rather than shouted, its expense. Her dark hair was styled in an elegant, no-nonsense chignon, and a single, luminous pearl earring was her only visible jewelry. She carried a slim leather briefcase, her expression composed but unyielding, her keen blue eyes sweeping the courtroom with an unervingly astute gaze. Beside her stood a younger man in a dark suit, clearly an assistant, holding a tablet. The courtroom, which had been filled with the judge's overbearing voice and Ashton's suffocating silence, suddenly fell into a hush. Judge Thorne's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of utter bewilderment, which quickly morphed into dawning, incredulous recognition. He straightened in his chair, his previous bluster deflating like a pricked balloon. "Ms. M.S. Sterling." Judge Thorne stammered, his voice suddenly several octaves higher and considerably less confident. "This is highly unexpected. Your meeting with the City Planning Commission isn't scheduled until this afternoon, I believe." He knew Olivia Sterling by reputation, and by sight. CEO of Sterling Innovations, a global tech firm with a significant new campus in the city, a philanthropist whose foundation had recently made a seven-figure donation to the city's arts programs. She was, in short, one of the most influential people in the state. Olivia Sterling's gaze, however, wasn't on the judge. It was fixed on the stooped, forlorn figure of Thomas Ashton at the defendant's table. Ashton, utterly confused by this dramatic turn of events, looked back at the elegant stranger, a flicker of something unreadable, perhaps a deeply buried memory, stirring in his tired eyes. He didn't know this woman. Or did he? "I'm not here about the City Planning Commission, Judge Thorne," Olivia Sterling stated, her voice cool and clear, resonating with an authority that instantly eclipsed the judge's. She took a few measured steps into the courtroom, her assistant following discreetly. "I'm here concerning the case of Sergeant Thomas Ashton." Her eyes met Ashton's, and for the first time that morning, a flicker of warmth, of profound respect, entered the frigid atmosphere of Courtroom 3. Judge Thorne, visibly flustered by Olivia Sterling's commanding presence and her direct interest in what he'd considered a throwaway case, fumbled with his gavel. "Sergeant Ashton. Ms. Sterling, with all due respect, this is a minor municipal matter, a vagrancy charge." "There is nothing minor about injustice, Judge," Olivia interjected smoothly, though a glint of steel had entered her voice. "And there is certainly nothing minor about the man standing before you. May I approach? I have information pertinent to Sergeant Ashton's character and background that this court clearly lacks." Thorne, caught off guard and acutely aware of the sudden shift in the courtroom's power dynamic, the law students were now sitting bolt upright, their boredom replaced by avid curiosity, could only nod dumbly. Yes, of course, Ms. Sterling." Olivia walked not to the bench, but directly to Thomas Ashton. She stood before him for a moment, her expression softening with an emotion that looked like a mixture of profound gratitude and sorrow. "Sergeant Ashton," she said, her voice now imbued with a warmth that enveloped him. "You may not remember me. It was a long time ago. My name is Olivia Sterling. I believe you knew my father. Captain Robert Sterling." Ashton's brow furrowed. The name Sterling, it echoed faintly from the mists of a war fought half a lifetime ago. He looked at her more closely, searching her features. Olivia turned to face the judge, her composure absolute. "Your Honor, you stand in judgment of a man you've dismissed as a vagrant, a failure. Allow me to tell you who Sergeant Thomas Ashton truly is." Her voice filled the courtroom, clear and strong. Sergeant Ashton served 2 tours in Vietnam with the 101st Airborne. He is the recipient of the Silver Star for Gallantry in Action, the Bronze Star with Valor Device, and 2 Purple Hearts. She paused, letting the weight of those honors sink in. Her assistant, on cue, discreetly handed a folder to the bailiff, who passed it up to the stunned judge. "These are copies of his commendations, Judge. But they only tell part of the story." Olivia's gaze returned to Ashton, a deep well of emotion in her eyes. 35 years ago, during the Battle of Hill 937, Hamburger Hill, as it's more infamously known, my father, Captain Robert Sterling, then a young lieutenant leading his first platoon, was critically wounded. His unit was pinned down, taking heavy fire, cut off. He was bleeding out, his radio smashed. It was a death sentence. The courtroom was utterly silent. Even Judge Thorne seemed frozen, the folder in his hand forgotten. "Sergeant Thomas Ashton," Olivia continued, her voice thick with unshed tears but unwavering, then as staff sergeant, refused to leave his officer behind. Under a hail of machine gun fire and mortar rounds, he crawled nearly 200 meters across open ground, reached my father, administered life-saving first aid, and then, with enemy soldiers closing in, he single-handedly held them off while dragging my father to a position where they could eventually be evacuated by a medevac chopper that Ashton managed to signal despite his own wounds. Her voice broke slightly. Sergeant Ashton didn't just save my father's life that day, Your Honor. He saved my entire family. He saved me, though I was only a child at the time. My father would have died on that hill if not for this man's incredible courage and loyalty. Ashton looked down, his hands trembling, the memories of that brutal, terrifying day flooding back with an almost physical force. He remembered a young, scared lieutenant. Sterling, yes. Olivia Sterling let the silence stretch for a moment, allowing the raw heroism of her story to permeate the courtroom. Then, she turned her steely gaze back to Judge Thorne, whose face had paled considerably. And this man, Judge Thorne, she declared, her voice ringing with controlled indignation, this bona fide American hero, who risked everything for his country and his comrades, is now homeless. He stands in your courtroom today, not for a crime of malice, but because he sought a moment's warmth near a memorial dedicated to men like him, men who gave everything. And how does this court, this system he fought to protect, repay him? With scorn. With a lecture on poor life choices. With the threat of jail time for the crime of being old, sick, and forgotten. The prosecutor, a young woman who had initially mirrored the judge's dismissiveness, now looked deeply uncomfortable, avoiding Olivia's eyes. My father, Captain Robert Sterling, spoke of Sergeant Ashton for the rest of his life, Olivia continued, her voice a powerful indictment. He called him the bravest man he ever knew. After the war, my father tried for years to find Sergeant Ashton, to thank him properly, to offer any assistance he could. But in the chaos of post-war relocations and with Ashton's own quiet humility, they lost touch. My father passed away 5 years ago, still regretting that he never found the man who gave him back his life. She took a step closer to the bench. I, however, have resources my father did not. My foundation has been actively working on initiatives to combat veteran homelessness. It was through a routine cross-check of shelter intake lists and court dockets involving homeless individuals that Sergeant Ashton's name came to my attention just this morning. Imagine my shock, Your Honor, then my outrage. Judge Thorne, visibly sweating now under his heavy robes, began to stammer. Ms. Sterling, I assure you, the court was unaware of these extraordinary circumstances. Precisely, Judge. Olivia cut him off, her tone sharp. The court was unaware because the court did not care to be aware. Did anyone ask Sergeant Ashton for his full service record? Did anyone inquire why a decorated veteran might find himself in such dire straits? Or was it easier to dismiss him, to process him as just another piece of inconvenient paperwork? As she spoke, the courtroom doors opened again, quietly this time. 2 figures entered and took seats in the back, their presence subtle but significant. One was a well-known investigative reporter from the city's leading newspaper, whom Olivia's assistant had discreetly alerted. The other was a stern-faced woman in a severe suit, identifiable to those in the know as a representative from the State Commission on Judicial Conduct, also alerted by Olivia's team, who had been monitoring Judge Thorne's courtroom for some time due to prior complaints about his handling of cases involving the vulnerable. Olivia gestured subtly towards them. It seems Sergeant Ashton's case, and this court's handling of it, is suddenly of interest to more than just those present in this room, Judge. The system that failed Sergeant Ashton after his service, and failed him again here today, is now under scrutiny. The implication was clear. This was no longer just about one homeless veteran, it was about systemic failure, and Thorne was now in the crosshairs. The air in Judge Thorne's chambers was thick with a tension that could be cut with a knife. Olivia Sterling sat opposite him, her composure unshakable. The representative from the State Commission on Judicial Conduct, Ms. Anya Sharma, sat to one side, observing with a neutral but intensely focused gaze, her notepad open. Sergeant Ashton, accompanied by Olivia's assistant, sat quietly in a corner, looking exhausted but with a spark of bewildered hope now kindling in his eyes. The investigative reporter had been politely but firmly kept outside, though the promise of a statement hung in the air. "Ms. Sterling," Judge Thorne began, his voice stripped of its earlier arrogance, now laced with a desperate attempt at conciliation, "I want to reiterate that had I been privy to Sergeant Ashton's distinguished record and your personal connection." Olivia held up a hand, silencing him. "Judge Thorne, this isn't just about my personal connection, profound as that is. This is about a man who dedicated his life to service, who bears the physical and emotional scars of war, and who, in his hour of greatest need, was met not with compassion or assistance, but with contempt from a representative of the very system he fought to uphold. My father never forgot Sergeant Ashton, not for a single day. He'd tell me stories, not just of the battle, but of Ashton's character, how he'd share his rations, how he'd mentor the younger soldiers, how he always put his men first, even before himself. He was, by all accounts, the epitome of a non-commissioned officer, the backbone of the army." She leaned forward. "After my father passed, I redoubled my efforts to find Sergeant Ashton, to ensure he was being cared for. It's taken years. To find him like this," her voice, for the first time, held a tremor of raw pain. "It's a stain on all of us, Judge. On the VA, on the city, and yes, on this court." Ms. Sharma from the Judicial Conduct Commission finally spoke, her voice quiet but carrying immense weight. "Judge Thorne, Ms. Sterling has provided my office with preliminary data compiled by her foundation. It suggests a pattern in your courtroom of disproportionately harsh treatment towards unrepresented defendants, particularly those experiencing homelessness or citing veteran status as a mitigating factor. We will, of course, be conducting a full review." Thorne visibly paled. This was no longer about a single embarrassing incident, his entire career was now on the line. He looked at Sergeant Ashton, truly looked at him, perhaps for the first time, not as a docket number or a vagrant, but as a man, an old, tired man who had once been a hero. He saw the faded purple heart on the worn jacket, the lines of hardship etched into his face, the quiet dignity that even his scorn couldn't extinguish. A flicker of something long dormant, shame, perhaps, or a memory of his own father who had also served, stirred within him. The weight of his callousness, of his casual cruelty, suddenly felt immense. He had judged a hero by his tattered clothes, and in doing so, had revealed his own profound failings. The fight seemed to drain out of him. He slumped slightly in his large leather chair, the picture of a man confronting an undeniable, and deeply uncomfortable, truth about himself. When Courtroom 3 reconvened an hour later, the atmosphere was electric. The gallery was now packed, news of the unfolding drama having spread like wildfire. The investigative reporter was front and center, pen poised. Judge Marcus Thorne re-entered, his face grim, his earlier pomposity completely gone. He looked older, diminished. He cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the expectant silence. "Before we proceed further, or rather, conclude the matter of case number CV 2025-784, the City vs. Thomas Ashton, this court has a statement to make." He paused, taking a deep breath. "First," he said, his voice low but carrying to every corner, "all charges against Sergeant Thomas Ashton are hereby dismissed with prejudice." A wave of relief, and then applause, rippled through the gallery. Olivia Sterling placed a reassuring hand on Ashton's arm. The judge held up a hand for silence. "Secondly, and more importantly, I wish to offer a profound and unreserved public apology to Sergeant Thomas Ashton." He turned directly to where Ashton sat, his gaze for once holding no condescension, only a deep, weary contrition. "Sergeant Ashton, my treatment of you earlier today was inexcusable. I failed to see the man before me, the hero before me. I was dismissive, arrogant, and unjust. My words caused you profound distress and public humiliation, and for that, I am truly and deeply sorry. You deserved honor, and I gave you scorn. There is no excuse for my conduct." He then addressed the wider courtroom. This incident has exposed serious failings in how this court, and perhaps our broader system, addresses cases involving our most vulnerable citizens, particularly our elderly veterans. Therefore, effective immediately, I am instituting new protocols. These will include mandatory sensitivity training for all court staff, a dedicated liaison with Veterans Affairs and local social service agencies, and a presumption towards diversion and support programs rather than punitive measures for nonviolent offenses stemming from homelessness or severe hardship. Furthermore, I will personally spearhead a proposal to the county for an emergency fund to assist veterans facing housing crises. Sergeant Ashton, his eyes glistening, simply nodded slowly, a gesture of immense grace. The old soldier, who had faced down death, now faced his public vindication with the same quiet dignity he had shown in his moment of deepest humiliation. The fallout from Judge Thorne's courtroom was immediate and widespread. News of Sergeant Ashton's ordeal and Olivia Sterling's dramatic intervention ignited a citywide, then statewide, conversation about veteran homelessness and the often invisible struggles of aging heroes. Judge Thorne, while retaining his position, found himself under intense scrutiny, his every ruling analyzed. True to her word, though, he did begin to implement the promised reforms, a man perhaps genuinely, if painfully, changed. Olivia Sterling didn't just offer Sergeant Ashton temporary relief. Through her foundation, she secured him a comfortable, permanent apartment in a newly established veterans housing complex her company had helped fund. More than that, she offered him a position he cherished, an honorary consultant and storyteller at the complex's community center, sharing his experiences and wisdom with younger veterans, a role that restored his sense of purpose. His days of sleeping on park benches were over. He was home. His story, and Olivia's unwavering loyalty to a man who had saved her father, became a local legend, a testament to the enduring power of courage, gratitude, and the simple act of seeing the true worth of a human being beyond their immediate circumstances. Thomas Ashton, in his quiet twilight years, finally received the honor and peace he had earned a lifetime ago on distant battlefields, his dignity not just restored, but celebrated. An aging hero, forgotten and scorned, finds justice through a debt of valor repaid. What was Judge Thorne's most outrageous comment that made your blood boil? Comment below. Let's show our respect for veterans like Sergeant Ashton, who deserve our utmost honor and support, and for those like Olivia Sterling who remember and repay life-altering kindness with powerful action. Do you know a story of a veteran who faced hardship after service, or an instance of profound gratitude changing someone's life? Share your inspiring thoughts. If this story of a forgotten hero's redemption and a CEO's powerful act of loyalty moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable content. Sergeant Ashton and Olivia remind us that true heroism endures, and profound gratitude can move mountains to right a wrong. No act of valor should be forgotten or disrespected.